Hi guys men. Thank you for watching these videos. Subscribe to the channel to not miss new videos. A few days passed, and the tension at home only grew. Tara seemed to be slipping further away, but I couldn't figure out why. I'd tell myself it was just stress from work, or maybe the kids were wearing her thin. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Then, one evening, I caught her in a moment of weakness. I'd been on the couch, flipping through channels, when I noticed her phone buzzing again. This time, I couldn't ignore it. She was in the kitchen, her back to me, and I was supposed to be minding my own business, but curiosity got the best of me. I glanced at her phone, just a quick peek, and there it was. A name I didn't recognize flashing on the screen, Jake. I wasn't proud of it, but I opened her phone. It was an accident, kind of, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. But once I saw the messages, it was like I'd fallen into a pit. The words jumped off the screen like they were alive. Can't wait to see you again tonight. I'm bringing the Bitcoin, as promised. My heart dropped, and everything in me screamed to stop reading. But I didn't. I couldn't. Every new message was a punch to my gut. They were planning to meet up, again. This wasn't the first time. I wanted to puke. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed up, staring at my phone, wondering if I had missed something obvious. The messages painted a picture I didn't want to see. Tara was having an affair, and it wasn't just any affair. The man she was seeing was buying Bitcoin with carrots. I couldn't process it. Bitcoin? Carrots? What the hell was that? My mind spiraled, and I couldn't stop thinking about that damn vendor from the other day. Was this the guy? Had he been part of it? Was there some deeper, twisted thing happening here that I didn't understand? The next day, I couldn't sleep. The entire night had been spent tossing and turning, replaying the messages over and over in my head. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that Tara was cheating or the sheer ridiculousness of it all. Bitcoin and carrots? It felt like a bad joke, one I wasn't in on. I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know, couldn't just go about our normal routine anymore. The trust was gone, shattered. I didn't care that it was Saturday morning, and she had planned to go out with friends. This needed to happen. When she walked into the kitchen, I was already sitting there, my phone on the table between us. She must have known something was off. She looked at me, and her face softened. "Hey, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice quiet but not quite hiding the nervous edge. I didn't say anything right away. I just slid the phone across the table, placing it in front of her. She glanced at it and instantly paled. She knew exactly what I had found. "Tara," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could, "who's Jake? And what's this about Bitcoin and carrots?" She looked at the phone, and for a split second, I saw something: guilt, panic, maybe even fear flash across her face. But then, just as quickly, her expression hardened, and she let out a shaky breath. "It's not what you think," she began, but her words sounded more like a rehearsed excuse than a real explanation. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Not what I think. Tara, how long has this been going on? You're having an affair. I saw the messages. And you're exchanging Bitcoin for carrots? What the hell is that about?" She looked away, avoiding my gaze. "It's not just about the carrots," she muttered, like that made everything better. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was supposed to be casual. Just a little fun. A distraction, you know?" "A distraction?" I repeated, disbelief creeping into my voice. "You're telling me this started because of a distraction? You're sleeping with someone else, and it's all about Bitcoin and carrots? What kind of twisted joke is this?" She winced. "I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. And I didn't think it would turn into this. But it's not serious. It's just someone I met online. It's not like you think." I had heard enough. The excuses, the weak justifications, it was all nonsense. She was caught, and now she was trying to make it sound like it wasn't as bad as it was. But it was bad. really bad. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I pushed it down for a moment. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to throw things, but I couldn't. I had to be calm, to figure out what the hell was happening. Is it over? I asked, my voice quieter now but still steady. Her silence said everything I needed to know. She didn't have an answer. The silence between us was suffocating. I had asked her a simple question, is it over? And she couldn't answer. That told me everything. It wasn't just an affair, it was a choice. And she hadn't made the right one. I stood up from the table and walked away from her, pacing in the living room. My mind was racing, but I couldn't seem to put the pieces together. How had we gotten here? How had I missed all the signs? Was I blind? Was I stupid? I kept hearing her words echoing in my head, it's not serious. It's just someone I met online. It's not like you think. I wanted to laugh, but there was nothing funny about it. She was looking for an escape, she said. A little fun. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I just felt this cold, empty void inside of me. It was like I was floating, not sure of where I was or what I was supposed to feel. Anger, confusion, betrayal, there was so much happening inside me, but it was all jumbled together. Tara finally broke the silence. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just what? I cut her off, my voice sharp. You just thought it would be a little distraction? A little fun? How could you do this to me? To us? I could feel my chest tightening, like I couldn't breathe. She stood up slowly, stepping closer to me, but I took a step back. Please, I didn't know how to stop. And it wasn't about you. You've been working so much, and I just felt. Felt what? I demanded. Neglected? Alone? Because that's how I feel right now. I don't even recognize you anymore. I don't know what's real and what's been a lie. Her face crumpled, and I saw tears well up in her eyes. For a second, part of me felt guilty. She looked so fragile, so human, but the anger inside me was louder than any sympathy. She had crossed a line that I couldn't come back from. You lied to me, I whispered, more to myself than to her. You kept this from me. You chose him over me. And for what? Carrots and Bitcoin? I could feel the sadness creeping in, filling the cracks that anger had left behind. I had trusted her. I had built a life with her. And now, everything felt like a house of cards, collapsing in front of me. I turned away, walking toward the front door. I needed space. I couldn't look at her right now. I had to clear my head, or I was going to lose it. But before I could leave, Tara spoke again. I love you, she said quietly, her voice breaking. I froze at the door, my hand on the handle. Those 3 words used to mean everything. But now, they felt empty. Hollow. I loved you too, I said, not looking back. But that's not enough anymore. I didn't know where I was going when I left the house that afternoon. My mind was a storm of emotions, anger, confusion, hurt, but underneath it all was this crushing realization that I couldn't unsee what had just happened. I couldn't unknow what I now knew. Tara's betrayal had carved a wound so deep I didn't know if it could heal. I spent hours walking, aimlessly, trying to work through the mess of my feelings. I thought about the life we had built, the good times, the memories. I thought about the kids, and how I was going to explain this to them if things fell apart. But more than anything, I thought about Tara. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we had for something so ridiculous? Bitcoin for carrots? Was I that blind? I found myself back at the corner where I had seen the carrot vendor a few days ago. It was strange, but for some reason, I felt like I needed to see that spot again. Maybe I was looking for answers, though. How could I expect carrots to provide any? There was no vendor today. The street corner was empty, and the only thing left was the faint smell of produce and the leftover remnants of a busy market morning. I stood there for a few moments, breathing in the air, trying to make sense of it all. I felt this overwhelming urge to just escape, to run far away and never come back. But I couldn't. I had responsibilities. And I had to face the reality of what had happened. When I returned home, Tara was sitting in the living room, waiting for me. She was still in tears, her eyes red and swollen. I could see the guilt in her expression, but it wasn't enough to make me forget the hurt. I sat down across from her, but this time, I didn't feel the same sense of familiarity. There was a distance now, a wall between us that hadn't been there before. The person sitting in front of me wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the person I thought I knew. "I don't know what to do now," I said, my voice sounding empty even to me. Tara's face crumpled again. "Please, don't leave me. I know I messed up. I'll do anything to fix this." I shook my head slowly. "I don't think I can fix this. I can't keep pretending like everything is fine. I need time. I need to think." Her face paled, and she nodded, but the look in her eyes told me that she knew what I was thinking. This wasn't just a bump in the road, this was the end. We didn't speak for the rest of the evening. The silence between us was deafening, and I found myself wondering if it was even worth trying to salvage something that was already broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the moment when Tara had confessed. The betrayal, the lies, the excuses. It all felt like a distant dream, something that wasn't really happening. But it was. And it hurt more than anything I had ever experienced. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to live in this mess anymore. I wasn't going to stay for the sake of the kids or out of some misguided hope that things would magically get better. I had to take control of my life again. "I'm filing for divorce," I told Tara that morning, my voice firm. "I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this." The look on her face was heartbreaking, but I couldn't take it back. I couldn't go back to a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I had made my decision. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. And as painful as it was, I knew it was the right one. So, I packed my things and walked away. And as I drove off into the unknown, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. Maybe it was the end of one chapter, but it was also the beginning of something else. Something I would figure out on my own. One thing I knew for sure, I would never look at carrots or Bitcoin the same way again. I spent the next few months in a haze. The divorce wasn't final yet, but I had made my decision. I stayed in a small apartment at first, barely enough space for me, let alone the weight of the situation I was carrying. There were days when it felt like the whole world was crashing down on me, and there were days when it felt like the weight had been lifted. But mostly, I was just numb. I didn't talk to Tara much after the divorce papers were signed. She called a few times, but each time, it felt like there was nothing left to say. We both knew what had happened. The affair, the lies, the ridiculous Bitcoin and carrot scheme, it was all just noise now, like the static on a broken radio. We had been through the motions of trying to fix it, but we both knew deep down it couldn't be fixed. Not after everything. It was strange, but for the first time in a long while, I started to feel like I had control again. I didn't have to watch over my shoulder, wondering what was real and what was a lie. I didn't have to second-guess every conversation, every look. I could just breathe. In the months that followed, I started picking up the pieces of my life. I focused on work, on the kids, and on myself. It wasn't easy, there were still nights when I would lie awake, replaying the moments of betrayal in my mind, but over time, the pain faded. Slowly, I learned to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner. I learned to forgive Tara, not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger and hurt. Holding on to that was like dragging around a ball and chain. I started dating again, too, though that was its own roller coaster. It was hard not to compare everyone to what I had with Tara, but with time, I learned that not everyone was like her. Not everyone would betray my trust in such a twisted way. Looking back on everything, I've learned a few hard truths. Life can be unpredictable, messy, and sometimes completely out of our control. But we always have the choice to decide how we move forward. The affair with the Bitcoin and carrots, well, that was just an absurd chapter in my life, but it taught me something valuable. You never know what someone else's intentions are, and you can't always control the outcome of your relationship, but you can control your reaction to it. You can control how you heal and how you grow. If there's one piece of advice I would give anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't let someone else's betrayal define your future. It's not easy to get past, but it's possible. And when you're ready, you can find happiness again, even if it's in the most unexpected places. And as for the guy selling carrots for Bitcoin? Well, I can't say I understand it, but I do know one thing: he's got a hell of a story. Maybe it's the weirdest, most absurd thing I've ever heard, but I can't help but laugh at how it all played out. The world is strange like that sometimes. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, conversations, and awkward silences. Filing for divorce wasn't easy, nothing about it was. It felt like a finality that I wasn't ready to face, but at the same time, it was the only thing that made sense. Tara's betrayal had shattered more than just our relationship, it had broken my trust in myself. How had I not seen the signs? How had I not recognized the cracks that had been forming all along? I spent a lot of time in my head during those early days. I found myself questioning everything: what I had done wrong, what I could have done differently. But no matter how much I replayed the past, the truth remained: Tara had made her choices, and I couldn't change that. It wasn't long before the practicalities of life started to take over. The kids needed to be taken care of. I needed to figure out where I was going to live, what my new routine would look like. I wasn't prepared for the loneliness that followed, though. At night, I would lie awake in the quiet of my apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the right choice. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I had acted too hastily. But deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. I started going to therapy, not just for the divorce, but for me. I needed to rebuild myself, piece by piece. I realized that I had spent so much time focused on fixing things for others, on making sure Tara was happy, on keeping the family together, that I had neglected myself in the process. Over time, I began to heal. Slowly, painfully, but surely. I reconnected with old friends, started doing things for myself again. I took long walks, jogged along the trails, and began to find a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. The strangest part was realizing that I could still move forward. Despite the hurt, despite the confusion, I could find a way to live a life that was mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was enough. The road to healing wasn't linear, and there were days when the weight of the past felt too heavy to carry. But the more I focused on myself, the more I saw that there was light beyond the darkness. Maybe one day, I would look back on this period as one of the hardest, but also one of the most transformative moments of my life. And as for Tara, I couldn't say what the future held. I couldn't change what had happened, and I couldn't fix her. But I could fix me. And that was enough for now. The days after I told Tara about the divorce were a blur. We didn't argue or try to convince each other to stay. It was as though we both understood that what had been could never be again. I focused on packing my things, and she spent most of her time alone in the bedroom, sometimes crying, sometimes silent. I hated seeing her like that, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the anger that still pulsed through me. The kids were asking where I'd been, why I wasn't coming home every night, and the only thing I could say was that I needed some time to think. I couldn't tell them the truth yet, not in a way they would understand. I needed to get my own head together before I even thought about explaining it all to them. I found an apartment in a quiet part of town, away from everything that reminded me of her. It was small, just a studio, but it was mine. I could breathe there. I didn't have to worry about Tara's lies, or the awkward silence in the house we used to call home. The first night alone in that apartment, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd always been a family man. My life had been shaped around the idea of us, of we, and now there was just me. But something strange happened. As the days passed, I began to feel lighter. I was still angry, still hurt, but I wasn't drowning in it anymore. I was starting to see a future outside of that marriage, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was moving forward. I had no idea where that would lead, but it felt like freedom. I spent a few weeks alone, just getting used to the quiet of my new life. My job kept me busy enough, but there were still moments of loneliness. I kept myself distracted, going to the gym, catching up with old friends, and trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that I was still missing something. Then one evening, while I was at a coffee shop, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace, I met an older man who struck up a conversation with me. His name was George, and he was in his mid-60s, his hair thinning and his clothes slightly worn. But there was a calm about him that made you feel at ease. We started talking about everything: life, work, relationships. Somehow, the conversation shifted to betrayal. He told me he had been married for 30 years, only to find out that his wife had been seeing someone else for nearly half of their marriage. "It's funny," he said, sipping his coffee. "When it first happens, you're crushed. You feel like the ground falls out from under you. But after a while, you start seeing it for what it really is. Not just betrayal, but a sign that something needed to change. It's painful, sure, but it's also a chance to grow." I don't know why I listened to him. Maybe because he wasn't just telling me what I wanted to hear. He was telling me the truth. He made me realize that I had been stuck, clinging to a version of my life that wasn't even real anymore. "I'm not saying it doesn't hurt," George continued. "But it's not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. And that, my friend, is where the real growth happens." I didn't know it at the time, but that conversation would stick with me, guiding me through the weeks that followed. The months after I left Tara were a strange mix of painful self-discovery and small victories. I started doing things I had forgotten I enjoyed: going for long hikes, reading books I never had time for, even picking up the guitar again after years of it collecting dust in the corner. I also reconnected with some old friends, people I hadn't seen in ages. They were shocked when I told them what had happened, but they didn't judge me. They supported me, reminded me of who I was before Tara and before the chaos. I wasn't happy yet, not by any means, but I was starting to find my footing again. And then, out of nowhere, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something told me to open it. It was from the carrot vendor. "Hey man, I don't know if you remember me, but I've been thinking about our conversation. Carrots and Bitcoin, huh? That was a weird thing. But I just wanted to say that I'm sorry if I made things more confusing for you. It's funny how the weirdest things sometimes lead to the most important realizations." I didn't know whether to laugh or be annoyed, but I couldn't deny it. This random vendor had, in some strange way, set off a chain of events that had led me to change my life. It was the night before I was set to meet with the lawyer and finalize the divorce. Tara called. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, and part of me didn't want to pick up. But I did. "Are you really doing this?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Are you really going to go through with it?" I could hear the desperation in her tone, and for a moment, it almost got to me. I wanted to say that maybe, just maybe, we could fix it. But I knew that wasn't the truth. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Tara," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The damage has been done. It's not just about what you did, it's about everything that came before it. The lies, the secrecy. I can't live like that anymore." She cried. I could hear it in her voice, the guilt, the regret. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was selfish." "I know," I replied. "And I'm sorry too. But this is where we part ways." That was it. The last conversation. The final goodbye. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't painless. But as I signed the papers, something inside me shifted. There was no more pretending. There was no more what if. I was free. Free to rebuild, free to move on. The days ahead weren't perfect, but they were mine to shape. I had learned the hard way that life doesn't always go according to plan. But sometimes, it's the unexpected turns that lead you to where you're supposed to be. And as for Bitcoin and carrots? They were the strangest part of my story, but in the end, they helped me see things more clearly. A small moment of absurdity that, in its own way, pointed me toward a new beginning.